Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving deep today, getting into some research method stuff. Think exam prep. We're going to be breaking down those lecture notes, especially those parts most likely to, show up on your next exam.
We're going to unpack some core concepts, hit you with some real-world examples, and by the end of this, you're going to be ready to ace those questions and actually understand why measurement matters in research, like really get it.
And stick around, because we've got a bonus for you. We'll tell you about Grade Guru and all the cool resources they have to help you totally crush those studies. So let's jump in. First up, what exactly is measurement in research? It's got to be more than just like slacking numbers on things, right?
Yeah, it's more than just numbers. It's like taking these big abstract research ideas and turning them into something you can actually observe and measure.
Okay, so how do you do that?
You can't really measure happiness directly, right?
Right.
But you can measure things like how often someone smiles or how they answer questions about their feelings. It's those things that can give you a peek into that complex feeling.
So it's like figuring out how to measure something invisible by looking for its footprints.
Yeah, exactly. It's called operationalization, where you take a slippery concept and turn it into something concrete. And there's a process for that. 3 steps, actually.
Don't pay it on me.
You define the concept really clearly, nail it down. Then you have to pinpoint the observable indicators, the stuff you can actually see and measure. And finally, you assign values to those indicators, so you can analyze the data.
So if we were talking about something like job satisfaction,
Uh-huh.
we'd first need to really define what that means. And it's got to be more than just, I like my job.
Right. Exactly. Job satisfaction could be about, feeling valued at work or having opportunities to grow and learn, maybe even a good work-life balance, all of that.
And then you'd find the things you can actually measure.
Yeah, you could ask them how much they enjoy their work tasks or how stressed they feel at work.
That makes sense. So then that brings us to those levels of measurement, which I'll be honest, those always kind of trip me up.
Oh, yeah.
How can we make sense of them in a simple way?
Okay, picture a ladder. All right, 4 rungs. And the higher you climb, the more sophisticated your analysis can be. The first rung is nominal.
Nominal.
Yeah. Just think names or categories, like political parties,
Mm-hmm.
or even hair color. There's no order or ranking.
So it's like sorting laundry,
Yeah.
whites, darks, colors. You're not saying one's better,
Yeah,
just putting them into groups.
perfect example. Then you climb to the next rung, and that's ordinal.
Yeah.
Order matters with this one. But the gaps between the categories, they aren't necessarily equal. Imagine a survey question. The ones that ask, how much do you agree with this statement? And then the answers are strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree.
You know the order, but you don't know if the difference between strongly disagree and disagree is the same as between agree and strongly agree.
You got it. Now, climb up to the next ring, and that's interval measurement.
Right.
Interval. Here, the intervals between each value are equal, but there's no true 0 point. So think of temperature in Celsius. 0 degrees doesn't mean there's no temperature, right? You can go below 0.
Right. So the difference between 10 and 20 degrees is the same as between 20 and 30, but you can't say 20 degrees is twice as hot as 10 degrees.
Exactly, you're getting it. And finally, we reached the top of the ladder. This one is the gold standard. Ratio measurement. It has equal intervals, A and ND, a true 0 point. Think things like age, height, income, stuff that has an absolute starting point.
So with ratio measurement, you can make those comparisons twice as much or half as many.
Exactly. Now, choosing the right level of measurement, that's crucial because it affects what kind of statistical analysis you can do. Okay, now, accurate measurement. It relies on 2 really important concepts, reliability and validity.
Okay, hold on. Reliability and validity. Break those down for me. Are they 2 sides of the same coin?
Think of them more like partners in crime fighting. Reliability, that's all about consistency. Think of a reliable friend. They're always there for you, right?
Right.
Just like a reliable measurement, it gives you consistent results time after time.
So if you measure something multiple times, you should get similar results each time, as long as nothing else has changed.
You got it. Now picture this. That measurement is consistently off, say by 10 pounds. It's reliable because it's consistent,
Uh-huh.
but it's not accurate. And that's where validity comes in. Validity asks, are we actually measuring what we think we are?
Okay, so validity is making sure your measurement is actually capturing the concept you're trying to study. And I remember from my notes, there are different types of validity too.
Right. You're right. There's internal validity. That one's all about making sure your study design is solid. And then there's external validity. That one asks, can you apply your findings to the wider world?
So if you're researching something like job satisfaction, but only among nurses at one specific hospital, external validity would ask, can these findings actually apply to nurses at other hospitals, maybe even other professions?
You nailed it. Now, things can get a little tricky when we're dealing with concepts that are hard to measure, like trickier than height or weight.
Yeah, I can see that.
Think about things like intelligence or leadership, stuff that's more complex, more multifaceted.
Right, right. How do researchers even approach measuring those slippery concepts? I mean, do they just like throw darts at a board?
It's more strategic than that. You have to break down those complex concepts into their core parts. Like imagine transformational leadership, right? You'd need to consider things like charisma, inspiration, and how well that leader encourages intellectual stimulation and growth.
Oh, okay. So instead of trying to measure this huge nebulous thing, you break it into like measurable chunks.
Exactly. And then you can figure out how to measure each chunk, and that's where scales and indices come into play. They're like your secret weapons for measuring the stuff that's hard to pin down.
Okay, so what's the difference between those two?
An index combines a bunch of related measures into a single score. So think of a democracy index that looks at things like free speech and fair elections.
So it's like a composite score, right? Taking into account lots of factors. And what about scales?
Scales focus on one specific construct, and they make sure that all the items within that scale are consistently measuring the same thing. So there's the Likert scale, which you've probably seen a million times. You know, the one where you rate your agreement with statements. And then there's the Gutman scale, which is all about hierarchical agreement.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing those pop up in my readings, but I think we'll have to save diving into those for next time.
Sounds good. But before we move on, let's pause for a minute and hear from our sponsor, Grade Guru. They can help you totally ace those research methods exams.
They're a great resource for students, with tons of practice exams, study guides, and even a full summary of this deep dive. Be sure to check them out at gradeguru.nl.
All right. Now back to our regular programming. Where were we? Oh, yes, scales. We were just talking about scales. Let's start with that one, the one you've probably seen a million times, the Likert scale.
Oh, yeah. The strongly disagree to strongly agree scale. Like when you're rating, like a product online.
Or giving feedback.
Yeah, exactly. It's super common.
Yeah.
Because it's really simple. And it works. You can use it to gauge people's attitudes or opinions about a specific statement, and then each option gets a number, so you can analyze it, like statistically.
So, like, if a researcher was studying people's attitudes about, let's say, climate change, they could use a Likert scale with a statement like, I believe climate change is a serious threat, and then people could rate how much they agree with that. Exactly. Now, the Gutman scale. It's different. It's designed to measure one trait or attitude, but in a hierarchical way. So imagine a bunch of statements. Each one is stronger than the last. Like it shows a stronger level of agreement or maybe acceptance of, whatever concept they're studying.
So if you agree with a strong statement at the top, you'd also agree with all the milder statements below it.
Yeah, like think of it like climbing a ladder. If you can reach the top rung, you can reach all the lower ones, right?
Right.
So for example, a Gutman scale that's measuring prejudice might start with a statement like, I would be comfortable having a person of a different race as a neighbor.
And then they get, like, progressively stronger.
Exactly. Like, I would be comfortable having a person of a different race as a close friend, and then maybe I would be comfortable marrying someone of a different race. The idea is if someone agrees with a higher level statement, they should agree with the ones below it too. It can be really useful for measuring sensitive stuff, things where people might not want to say what they really think.
So it's like a sneaky way of getting at their true attitude.
You could say that. Okay, so we've covered the basics of scales and indices, but why should students care about all this measurement stuff? What's the big takeaway? Why is it so important?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The big takeaway is this. Measurement is the foundation of all good research. If you don't have accurate and reliable measurement, your findings are basically useless, like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand.
It's not going to last very long.
Nope, it'll crumble. So if you want to do research that people will trust, research that matters, you gotta be good at measurement.
So become a master measurer.
Right, I know this is a lot of information. We've covered a lot of ground, but let's try to boil it down. What are the key points you should focus on, when you're studying?
Yeah, let's hit the highlights.
First, the different levels of measurement. Nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Gotta know those cold. What they mean, examples of each one, and how that level of measurement changes what kind of statistical analysis you can use. It's all connected. Got it.
And then reliability and validity. Those are your dynamic duo. Reliability, think consistency. Validity, think accuracy.
Don't forget those. Okay, what else?
Different types of validity. Internal and external. Remember, internal is about making sure your study design is solid. External, it's about whether those findings apply to other groups of people or other settings.
Got it. Now, another thing that I remember always tripping me up was like how to operationalize those big abstract concepts.
Oh yeah, that can be tough.
Any tips for tackling that?
Break it down. Don't try to measure something massive like intelligence all at once. Find those key parts of that concept and then figure out how to measure each piece.
It's like those puzzles, the ones where you got to put together a bunch of tiny pieces to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And remember those tools for measuring complex concepts, scales and indices.
Those are our friends.
Right. You got to know the difference between a scale and an index. And be familiar with the different types, like that Likert scale and the Gutman scale. Those are bound to show up on the exam. But remember, measurement isn't just about, memorizing stuff.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's about knowing how to use these concepts in real-world research.
Yes. So as you're studying, think about how you would actually measure those variables in a study.
What tools would you use? How would you make sure it's reliable and valid?
Yeah. Think about how you would measure something like job satisfaction or leadership effectiveness, in a real-world situation.
And don't forget, if you need some extra help, Grade Guru has got your back.
Yeah, they have tons of resources, practice exams, study guides, and even a full summary of everything we've talked about today.
Head over to gradeguru.nl to find all that good stuff.
Now, before we wrap things up, we want to leave you with something to think about. We've talked about how important it is to measure things accurately, reliably, but what are some of the things that seem impossible to measure? And how could researchers try to study those things?
Ooh, that's a great question. What are those, dark rooms of research? The things that defy easy measurement. We'll dive into that in just a moment, so stay tuned. And we're back, ready to tackle that, that brain teaser we left you with. What are some things that seem almost impossible to measure? And how do researchers even begin to wrap their heads around them?
It really makes you think about what we can actually study, right? I mean, if you can't measure something, how can you really say you understand it?
It's like trying to describe a color
Yeah.
that you've never actually seen before. Without that shared point of reference, how do you even begin to communicate it?
Exactly. It's like, what are those invisible colors in research? The concepts that make measurement seem like an impossible task.
Well, one that pops into my head right away is consciousness. How do you measure something that's so subjective, so internal?
Yeah.
We can observe behaviors, we can look at brain activity, but can you ever really capture the essence of what someone is experiencing in their own mind?
That's a big one. It's a question that has stumped philosophers and scientists forever. I mean, there are some attempts, scales that try to assess different levels of awareness or how responsive someone is, but it's a tough concept to pin down, that's for sure.
It's like trying to measure, a dream. You might remember bits and pieces, feelings, images.
Yeah.
But can you really quantify the experience itself?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And another one that's tricky, creativity. How do you measure something that's so unique to each person? Is it about how many ideas they come up with? Or how original those ideas are? Maybe it's about the impact those ideas have.
It's like trying to measure, I don't know, inspiration. With a ruler, it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, you need a different approach. A lot of researchers use those divergent thinking tests, where they ask people to come up with as many different solutions to a problem as they can. Then they look at things like fluency. So how many ideas did they come up with? Flexibility. How many different categories do those ideas fall into? And originality. So, how unique are those ideas?
So instead of trying to give it one single score, you look at the different sides of creativity.
Yeah, exactly. Now, then you have those really big concepts, love, spirituality, even the meaning of life. Those make measurements even harder, I think, because they're so personal, often tied to individual beliefs, values, all of that.
It almost feels, I don't know, wrong to try and boil something so deep and meaningful down to a number.
I get that.
Yeah.
And that's why when researchers are studying stuff like that, they tend to use those qualitative methods, like in-depth interviews, or maybe they'll analyze personal stories. They're trying to understand those concepts from the perspective of the people who are experiencing them instead of, trying to force a measurement onto them.
So it's more about understanding the whole human experience, even the parts that you can't really measure.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder, I think, that even our most advanced tools for measuring have their limits. You should always be, critical of the data you're collecting and the conclusions you draw from it.
It's like that saying, a map is only a representation of the actual territory.
Right.
Yeah.
Well said. There's always more to discover. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from, those fundamental ideas about measurement to the challenges of trying to measure things that seem impossible to measure. Hopefully you've got a better grasp on those key concepts and the theories you'll need for those exams.
Because remember, measurement is at the heart of good research. It helps us move beyond guessing, beyond just opinions. It brings us into, the world of evidence and real knowledge.
And if you need some extra help, don't forget about Grade Guru. They've got those practice exams, study guides, and even a full rundown of everything we've talked about today.
Head on over to gradeguru.nl to check that out. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of measurement. We hope you learned something new, and maybe even sparked a little bit of curiosity about all the things we can measure, and maybe those things we can't. So keep thinking critically, and keep asking those research questions.